Hi, I'm Dr. Alphonse Javed. Over the past year, we have had so many amazing guests on the show. We have talked about everything from chess ministry to immigration, urban missions to cricket, and gentrification to dance. We have heard so many stories of how God is working in urban settings, in Muslim contexts, and around the world. Every week, we share a new episode highlighting an important voice we believe deserves to be heard. But this month, we will be resharing our most popular episodes. Even if you have already heard them, we believe you can still learn something new. Please enjoy.
Many of them came in and says, "We want to know about Jesus." Okay, well, here you go. Let's begin.
You are listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, a podcast that presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome back to our Urban Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Alphonse Javed. Today I am joined by David again, who ministers among Muslim immigrants in a major city. Thank you again for joining us today, David.
It's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
It's a honor to have you back. We're going to continue our conversation where we left in our previous recording.
All right, well, let's get to it.
What misconceptions need to be addressed when ministering among Muslims?
They're not all terrorists.
Yeah.
That's an old one, but still there are many. I've had many teams that have come in and are going like, "Hey, I'm not really comfortable with this." And the first part I want to say was, okay, I know you realize you were coming to work with this group, right? But then the next part of that is they would say something like, "Well, isn't like a mosque like the devil's stomping grounds?" And I'm going, "Whoa." I said, "That's not how that works." I mean, don't get me wrong, spiritual warfare is real, but it's a mosque, it's a building, and they're going to continue to pray. And you can go in there and you can watch them, but you can also go in there and afterwards have conversations with one, two, three individuals, and then later invite them out for a meal or to your home to have a deeper conversation. So
Yeah.
there's no problems in that. It's just that's one thing that you look at. But the other part is many people say, well, they don't want to hear the gospel. That's also not true. There are many, many, many. To give an example, I had some friends in another city who all they could do because they're doing part-time work right now is they can set up an ESL class and they can put resources out on a table. And they had over 200 gospel resources.
Hmm.
All these migrants came in and cleaned them out. All of it gone. And it wasn't used for, anything inappropriate. It was taken, it was read, and people are now beginning to ask questions. Many of them came in and says, "We want to know about Jesus." Okay, well, here you go. Let's begin. And that's how it is. Many people within the body of Christ say, well, they don't want to know that. And that's a misconception.
Right.
There are
Right.
many that want to know. They just haven't had the opportunity to know. And like I said earlier, meet some that have been here for 15, 20 years that they're like, "You're the first Christian I've ever met."
What do you love or admire about the people you serve?
Their time is not based on a schedule. It's
Mm,
based on relationship.
yeah.
And so many times over, it's hospitality.
Mhm.
It's making sure that if you're coming in their house as a guest, whether here or overseas,
Mhm.
they're going to say, "Here is the best spot.
Mhm.
Here is the biggest portion. Here is all of these things." So many times over, if you do this too often, you're going to get fat. That's just hands down. You're going to get really big because you're getting fed the biggest portions all the time, which means that you then have to say, "I'm no longer a guest. I'm like you. You and me, we've been in this relationship together for a good bit." So, but the hospitality, the relationship, they would give you the shirt off their back, even though they only have the one shirt.
Yeah.
And that's just who they are as people. And so over time, I tell many, I said, if you take the time to get to know them and you're from a city, most of the time cities are very fast paced, oriented, like,
Mhm.
let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. You ask somebody, "Hey, where's this place?" They'll be nice to you. They'll say, "It's over this way." And they're like, "But I gotta go," because there's not that relationship side.
Right.
But that's a big, when you say culture shock, or many coming from overseas where they step into this and they're going, wait, I don't understand. It's too fast. What do I do? And so that's why they run to their own communities and hope that they can get the best hope or help that they can get at that point in time.
Yeah. So let me ask you something that is happening even today as we talk about this community, Muslim community. Ramadan is observed by Muslims worldwide right now, with the last day being April 9th. By the time this episode is published, they will be right in the middle of reaching the half of that Ramadan. For our listeners who may not be familiar with Ramadan, please tell us about this month-long observance, but also your observation on Muslims during this time of fasting.
Okay. So it's pretty simple. Their fasting is not what we would like to call the what people understand as fasting, the biblical style of fasting. They do have 30 days of fasting and prayer. They don't eat, or I said, yeah, they eat before the sun comes up. They can eat and drink anything before the sun comes up. They fast all day until the sun goes down. Then they're allowed to eat and drink as much as they want. In some cultures, this is seen as being helping them to reflect on if they were poor and without. That's what it feels like. For others, it's meant to be a time of focused prayer, focused on God, forgive me for what I've done, and reflecting on a lot of what they've done throughout the year, and asking God to forgive them, asking God to show them the straight path. These are all things that they will say, and especially on their prayer on Friday, which is their Sabbath. And let's see, within that, they also have Hajj. This is a very important time to make that trip to Hajj. And it's to Mecca, where you'll see many people from all over the world come and march around the Kaaba, the middle black cubicle in the middle. And so you'll see it, and it's supposed to be understood that this thing is something that Abraham and Ishmael had built. So that's what it's kind of understood. But it's this black stone right in the middle that you'll see thousands walking around. And so Mecca is the main one, but it depends on the culture too, because others have built their own version of Mecca, especially even within West Africa. They will have their own version of Mecca where you can go to that instead of making the trip to Mecca. And so yes, looking at all of that and how you've asked this, they have this other thing called the Night of Power. And the Night of Power is really, really important. This is the time in which God was supposed to reveal to Muhammad, Allah reveals to Muhammad, here are the 7 layers of heaven, and he took them all over the place in one night. And so many of them will, for my observance in this, they will take, say, 7, 8 guys, they will sit them down, and they'll have a crowd of people around them. And all these guys will open up different portions of the Quran, and they'll begin reading all at the same time just to make sure they can read the entire Quran in one night. And so it'll be different things going on at once, but you'll listen and you'll go, whoa, this is something else. But another important part about that night is we have this 30 days of prayer, praying for the Muslim world, and that during this time that God would really show them Jesus, show them Isa al-Masih in dreams and visions, because that's what they're hoping, is that God is going to show them something during this time. And so many of them that are more intuitive and wanting to ask and seek, this is a time that they will come to Christ. And so that's what we as believers can do, is pray during that time, invite them to break fast in your home. That's, showing that hospitality. If you're in a city, a better way is to say, if you notice somebody that's Muslim and you're thinking, whoa, I see them going, even when the sun goes down, they're still working. Well, you could be that one that brings them water or some dates or a snack or something to show them that love and be able to have this conversation with them, because it's during that time that once they get that food, they have energy again and they're willing to have deeper conversations, because that's what they're supposed to be doing this time anyway, is praying and seeking God. And so, yes.
Yeah. So It seems like there are a lot of opportunities to engage Muslim community during Ramadan. So let me ask this question. Is Ramadan an easier time to speak about spiritual matters? How does it impact outreach?
Most people think that it would impact it negative.
Yeah.
If you're working in ESL, oh yeah, that's going to affect your ESL classes.
Mm,
Like it'll cut them off about halfway through the month.
right.
But if you're switching the focus onto having more, I would say, gospel conversations,
Mm,
then what you can do is just say, okay, hold off on the ESL. Let's see who we can invite to our home, or let's see if there's any that we can go and be with them in their home
right.
and have conversations, allowing them to pray, of course, but knowing that they're going to be like, yeah, I'm good to go. I've got energy now. Let's have this conversation. It's also fantastic if you're a night owl person that likes to stay up late. Uh, yeah, you can go in and they'll talk to you between the hours of 7 to 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
And so, me, I'm an early bird, and so I will suffer to 2 o'clock, but that's usually about my limit.
Good. So, how have you seen God's hand in your work?
God's hand in my work. This has been a long one, but I will say this. First, God has shown me many, many things over time. But
Mhm.
what's been more important is He's shown me that there are so many organizations that are focused on reaching all of the nations. And so many of them are like, this is, I'm focused here, I'm focused here, I'm focused here.
Mhm.
And many are not willing to network. But over time, I've seen barriers break down, and people are like, yeah, this would be good if we could just network and meet here or meet here, or meet here in this process
Hmm.
and say, so God's opened up some networks, creating such a large network now where even it was last year, it was the first time I'd ever seen a group from different organizations gathered to focus on one specific people group that I've been working with for years and answer questions and strategy and things like that. And that led into the fall where they had another strategy meeting and another training and more things that happened since then that I've seen among this group that's 99.9% Muslim. I've seen one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. It's like 7 people come to Christ since
Mm.
in December. Yeah,
Wow, man. That's awesome. Fantastic. So, networking, huh?
networking, God networks, and then this one. This is more for, I would say, the audience. You may not be the one that gets to lead somebody to Christ,
Mm.
but you may be the one that tills the soil. And in tilling the soil, you may not get to see what happens when the seed's planted or the seed gets taken up. But you could be the one that's working the grounds and beginning to plant and put out seed and hoping that
Mm.
something's going to happen. There are many, many generations of people praying for specific people groups and hoping that something's going to happen. But you may not be that one. And sometimes you may be the one that happens to be there at that moment that somebody's ready to accept Christ and they've already been on a journey.
Mhm.
I've been both, where it's been this long, I haven't seen anything. And then all of a sudden somebody says, hey, I've been on this journey and I'm ready right now. It's like, oh, you and me, let's talk. And they accepted Christ on the spot. And it's like, okay. And then years later, I'm still, okay, God, what's going on? I'm still tilling soil. I'm still casting seed. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
and we got 7. And I'm going, okay, God, something's happening. And some of these, out of all of it, it's scary to say this, but at the same time, it's like personally, I've seen one guy get baptized, but I didn't get to baptize. I was just there to witness.
Yeah.
Personally, I've seen one guy come to Christ, and I was there for that. As in, him and I, God used us and had that conversation. And then after that, now I've constantly been planting, seed, but hadn't seen anything until God brought 2 guys that had already accepted Christ, coming from a Muslim background, and they led 2 others to Christ. And I went, whoa, this is amazing. And at the same time, I'm having conversations with 2 that are on the brink of trying to figure out if they want to be followers of Jesus or if they want to maintain being Muslim. And so now with that, it's like, okay. And then 2 others in another city, and I'm going, okay, God's working this out. And then another one pops up. I'm going, okay, God, what are you doing? And so for the very first time, there's a specific people group having their own church for the very first time in America.
That's amazing.
So
That's amazing. Talking about journey, let me ask you this question. What do you think in your life and background has led you to this time and place? What is your God story?
my God story is one about faith and never stopping to ask God to show me the way. Uh, never stopping and saying, I always said this to my dad, it was God has me. And to say that God has me, I knew it and I believed it. And this is me talking to my dad at age 18, 19, going to college, and he's freaking out like, where are you going to go and what you going to do? And, oh, you're going to go into ministry. You'll never make any money in that, or, things like this. But uh, as I grew in that and shared this with my dad became really strong in his faith. And I couldn't believe it. I love my dad. I love him to death. I watched how God used those moments in my own life and showed my dad like this is walking in faith.
Yeah.
And so then I come to this point where I'm at, where I was always, God, where am I going to go if I'm going to serve among anybody? Where's it going to be?
Right.
And God showed me in seminary, the same thing. Every time I asked, I said I would ask. But that's the point. God says, ask me. Ask and you'll receive. But it's not like you're going to receive a car or a plane or money or things like this. He says, ask and you'll receive. And he's asking for you to ask him to direct you in many ways. And so for me, I was asking for God's direction. And every time I asked, God directed me. And so even in seminary through my master's degree, every time I asked, I had this sheet of the 7,000 plus unreached people groups around the world that have never heard the gospel. And then every time I used that whole list in every single one of the classes that I had that list in, I had to do research on one group, which was about 8 times. I looked at that and I would pray over it. And over that list, I always ended up with one from West Africa. And it was so weird to me. I was like, okay, God, I see you're directing me toward this. But now what? Went through a whole nother organization. And at a certain point, this is how it happened. My son, he was not able to pass the medical side of our organization's inspection period. And they said, well, we can't send you. And what did I do then? I said, wow, we've been in this process for about 4.5 years. This is going to be kind of hard to work with. I said, we don't know what to do now because this is where we thought we were going, but God's showing us something else. And I said, I know what I haven't done. I haven't asked God. And in doing so, God showed me. He showed me in a dream. I got on my hands and knees that night, and I asked my wife. I said, "Hey, um, let's pray." And I did a devotion with our son. And at the time, he's only 2. So we did this devotion. We're here, and I said, "God, we really want you to show us as a family where we need to go. In a dream, a vision, your word, wherever you want to show us, please just show us." And at night, I had a dream. A guy named Chris, New York, and 100,000 West Africa. And it was just like that, where I went, well, I guess that's where I'm going to go and check it out. So I spent the next couple of hours doing research over the internet. And this is kind of help people understand when this happened. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I looked at my wife and I said, do you know anything about these details? And she said, no, go back to bed. And she rolled back over and went to sleep. I couldn't sleep, so I continued to do research and couldn't find anything until I met with Al Hodges over the phone. I said, hey, you know anything about this? And he's like, this is amazing. Yeah, do you remember a year and a half ago? No. I said, barely remember breakfast yesterday. So he's like, well, let me tell you, there was in a specific conference that you and I were at, you went to each different room praying where God was leading. And then you went to the last one, and that's where you met a lady named Audrey Smith, and she was the one who told you about these 3 details. Funny for me that I didn't remember that, but he did. And so next thing you know, that's what we did. We reached out to Chris in New York, reaching 100,000 West Africans, and here we are. 10 years later, doing the work, continuing to do it. And so that was my God moment. And it was so specific. There were people like, I've never had that happen. I'm like, have you ever asked for that to happen? I said, because I've seen God
Yeah.
have me in many different ways. But
Yeah.
I said, when I was really sitting there going, God, I don't know what to do. And God said, listen. It was
Right.
told you a
Right.
year and a half ago. Listen. And so that's what it is.
Yeah. Is the mission field in which you serve conducive to involving your family? If so, how do you and your family accomplish family on mission?
Family on mission is a fantastic way to put it, because obviously there's a balance in school. There's a
Mhm.
balance in making sure you're spending ample time with your children,
Yeah.
making sure you're spending ample time with your spouse, based on what is needed, and then saying, okay, as a family, are we going to do this together, or is this just going to be one of us doing this? And many times over, don't get me wrong, I can honestly say there's moments where I felt like, oh, I feel like this is only me. But then my wife reminds me, hey, we're all in this,
Mhm.
and you're doing this part. But when you bring them to the house, we're all in this, and that means that every one of us are doing something. And when you take one of the boys out with you, we're all in it. So I mean, yeah, I'll have them in on the ESL classes. They're all part of that. I'll have them in conversations here. My wife does the hosting. Whenever the any men or women come to our home, my wife is the one she's the one cooking. She's the one serving it up, and she's just showing like this is a home of hospitality and stepping into their culture where it would be odd for me to slap on an apron and go over there,
Right.
start serving them up. They'd look at me like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And so, all that being said, all of that is part of it. And it's really neat because then my own children have played a major role in that. Where one night I was really praying. Now, there's a whole story behind this, but I was praying. I was like, Dad, I'm about to share with this one guy here in his home. And I reached out, texted my wife. I said, "Hey, be in prayer for me right now." And so
Mm.
I got to share with this guy. And she was like, "Okay." So what does she do? Well, she's praying with my oldest son at the time. And as she's praying, this is a whole year in the making, but he stated, "Mom, I'm ready right now." And she goes, "You're ready for what?" He goes, "I'm ready to accept Jesus right now."
Mm.
And I went, so I didn't know that until I got home.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, this is fantastic." And so even though I wasn't there to personally lead my own child to Christ, my wife
Right.
was there and he was ready. They were praying for dad to share with somebody else. I'm ready right now. Let's do this. And so me and my wife, we got to baptize and it was great. It
Amen.
was just one of those like moments of you get to see the work play out, knowing that God not only has, like I always said, God has me, but God has my family.
Amen.
And as long as I'm faithful, God's going to continue to go, hey, look, this is it. And even when, if I would say, if I'm not faithful, does God still have my family? Of course he does. But it does help to be an example in the household.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your go-to Bible verse for encouragement or one that illustrates what you hope to accomplish? Is there one?
Oh, goodness. Give me about 3.5 seconds. I was in Bible drills when I was going through school, but this is one that was shared with me, and I run to it more now than I have in the past because I
Mhm.
didn't think about it until it was shared, and I was like, oh, this is something. If you have raced with runners and they have worn you out,
Mhm.
how can you compete with horses?
Mhm.
Hmm. Now, to kind of take that into stride,
Mhm.
literally speaking, if you're out there and you're just running and running and running and
Mhm.
running and gunning, as we call it, and you're doing this work and you're like, this is tiring. This ministry work is hard, or I don't know if I have enough energy for this or anything like that. God then says, hey, this is what he told Jeremiah. He says, if this is making you tired and you're just running with men, how are you going to be ready to run with the horses that I'm
Mhm.
giving you? I got bigger things, bigger challenges for you.
Mhm.
How are you going to be able to do that? And so that was God saying, step it up.
Mhm.
You're okay. I've got it. And so that's one verse. My
What's the
other go,
reference? Repeat the reference again for the audience.
Jeremiah 12, verse 5.
Jeremiah 12:5.
That was one that was shared with me, and I've loved it ever since. But before that, my all-time go-to, hands down, was Matthew 6:33 and 34. Everybody's always jumping in on that one, but that's my go-to. But seek ye first the kingdom of God
Mm,
and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself.
mhm,
Each day has enough trouble of its own.
mhm, mhm,
And so that taught me one of those things about what kind of seed are you? The parable of the sower. Are you the seed where it hits and Satan takes it before you can even let it take root? Are you
Right.
the other one that you don't even have good roots yet, but then
Mm,
all of a sudden a little persecution comes, somebody talks to you and you're like, oh gosh, I'll never do that again. I'll never share. I'll never talk. Or are you the one that you take root, but you grow up among thistles and thorns, which is things like worrying about everything around you. Oh, do I have enough money? All your dreams and everything, you're focused on the white picket fence, the big house, the things like this that are all worldly, they're nothing. And when the time comes, the end is near, they're nothing.
mm,
And so, or are you the seed that hits and you're like, I'm going to go and share, make it 30, 60, 100 times.
mm,
And so that's that. And so that's how God, he brings this to me and says, look at this verse, because if you seek my kingdom first, all your needs are taken care of. And then you'll see more and you have nothing to worry about.
mm,
And don't worry about tomorrow. Don't even worry about today. Each day has its own troubles. Let them be. God's got you. Move
mm.
forward. I said
Got it.
a lot of it is perseverance.
Yeah. Going back to my earlier questions when I opened this conversation about being called to be ministers of the gospel. We are all called to share the gospel. How
Mhm.
can we be more effective? I'm thinking about your illustration here too. How can we be more effective?
One thing is joining existing work. It's something even I've had to learn to do here.
Mm,
Uh, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
yeah.
There's many times there's something that's already going on. And if you, as just an active member of the body of Christ, say, I wonder what's going on, and just begin to explore even a little bit, you will find different ministries that are going on, usually different physical needs met ministries. And it's from there that you begin to say, okay, God, where are you taking me in this so that I can share with others? And so it's that joining existing work. Now, with that being said, sometimes you're in a place where there's no existing work.
Mm, mhm,
And if that happens and you feel the need on your heart to say, okay, uh, I think it's time to start something. Well, don't just start something. We say this in everything you do: pray,
mhm,
search out the needs of the community. So you're not starting something that's not even, you're starting something that's like, this isn't needed, but
mhm,
search the needs of the community so that when you're going to see them, you're meeting that need, and then start it. And so that's definitely the existing work part is something I had to learn within the last 5 years.
good. No, that's a good recommendation. That's very good. What's a few practical things that a church or an individual can do to reach out to diverse populations that may be different to their own culture?
Well, if you have a good palate and you want to go and test the food, restaurants,
Yeah.
hands down, hit their places of gathering.
Mm.
Go check them
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, I love it because every culture I've ever been a part of, they stick to their own food.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they say, Americans, your stomachs are like trash cans. You put anything in it. And I'm just like, well, thank you. But we also enjoy what we put in there. So it's really funny to hear that. So, number one, restaurants, very practical, easy to go.
Mhm.
Number two, places of worship. Though most are like, I don't know if I'd ever step into that. One of the challenges accepted it's not really a challenge at all to step into somebody's place of worship and just observe. But when you do, it opens up a door, an opportunity where people can look at you and say, "Hey, I get it. Um, you're interested in our people and you want to know more. I'm willing to tell you more. Sure, let's sit down." And so, places of worship, things like that, and then obviously inviting them into your home, or seeing if you can meet outside of a home at a restaurant, and then possibly being invited into their home. These are all very practical ways that
Very practical. Thank you, David. Anything else you like to add to this conversation?
I've said it probably too many times in here, but meet them where they're at. Don't try to invite them to where you're at, or
Yeah.
try to get them where you're at. Meet them where they're at. One thing that was very important and shared with me by another minister from a different people group, he said, "My people are a hard people."
Mm.
Oh, he says, "They are so hard." He says, "But as much as they share, that's as much as you need to share."
Mm.
He says, don't try to overdo them. As much as they share, that's as much as you share.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for
Fantastic.
the last thing, because we talk about heavy topics, and thank you for being here and sharing all these are important, very extremely. I think these are the things that believers should be thinking on. So, because we talk about heavy topics, I'd like to ask you to tell a joke to lighten the mood.
I'm so horrible with jokes. My kids, they love my dad jokes as much as I'd like to pick on them. And so there's an old one that makes me smile each time it's said, because my kid used to do this on the train all the time. But he would go, "Do you want to hear a joke about pizza?"
Yeah.
Never mind, it's too cheesy.
That
And
is
just as simple
good.
as
I
that.
like it, man. This is good. No, that's a good joke. I like it. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show. Again, that was David talking about bringing Jesus's message to our neighbors. And thank you to all our listeners. We truly could not do this without you. If you learned something, have a topic suggestion, or would like to leave us feedback, drop us a note at oururbanvoices.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show and leave an honest review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tune in 2 weeks for more honest discussion from diverse voices.
You've been listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, which presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry.